Story 1. I was a business major and went to see my sister, who was a new graduate registered nurse. She had to pick up a shift on a medical or surgical ward while I was visiting. I was 19 in a strange city and went with her because there was nothing else to do. I met a young orthopedic surgeon who suggested I tag along for something to do at his fracture clinic. This happened in the early 90s. It would never fly now, and I became interested in healthcare. Now, I'm an emergency room physician and hospitalist for 20 years and love my job. Most of the time. Story 2. A math teacher in middle school asked if I wanted to get out of bed an hour early every morning and take a math class I didn't even need. I said yes, learned to write beginner's all-purpose symbolic instruction code, and went on to a very successful career in software engineering. Story 3. One time, I decided to walk 2 hours to the mall on a Sunday because the buses stopped running. 2 hours later, at a bus stop, I met my future wife, waiting for a bus that wouldn't come. We have been married for 31 years. Story 4. When I really couldn't afford it, I bought a Rock Band set for the Xbox 360. Later, I was able to get my first job in the games industry doing quality assurance for Rock Band, and now, 15 years later, it's my career. Story 5. On July 1st, 1977, I decided to keep to my physical training schedule. I was in the Marine Corps, where physical fitness and appearance are a big deal. On Monday, Wednesday, and Friday after duty hours, I would run 3.5 miles and hit the weight room for about an hour. The 4th was Monday, and we had been given a 4-day weekend, so I thought about taking a day off. I am glad I did not. As I was warming up, the prettiest woman Marine I had ever seen came up to me and asked if she could run with me. Not being a big dummy, I said yes, and off we went. On October 7th, 1978, we were married in the 21 area chapel. In a little over 2 months, we are going to celebrate our 46th wedding anniversary. Story 6. Making friends with a kid the first day of kindergarten simply because we were the first ones there set a chain of events into motion. I met my first girlfriend through his sister, which directly led to meeting my current wonderful partner. My taste in music is largely influenced by his dad, who showed us all kinds of awesome older music from his collection and even let me learn guitar on his old guitar that was kept under my friend's bed. 35 years later, we're still best friends and work at the same place. My life would be completely different if my mom hadn't been early in getting me to kindergarten on the first day. Story 7. Back in my 20s, I was working as a restaurant manager and hating life. One day, an advertisement came on the radio as I was driving to work. It was an ad for a temp agency that was hiring for a major tech company near me. I thought it would be interesting to see what it was about, so I called them. 25 years later, I am still working at the same tech company. I was only a temp for a few months and am now making way more than I ever would have made in food service. Story 8. To start contributing to a 401k at a cheesy part-time job, I kept contributing with each successive job, and now, 25 years later, between that money and my husband's pension, I am able to retire comfortably. When I started, I was only putting in $3 a paycheck, and my husband laughed, but he isn't laughing now. Story 9. My 7th grade gym teacher said I should stay after school and join the track team after running the gym mile. 21 years later, it has influenced so many of my decisions and friend groups. Story 10. When I was in the Army, US, I had just gotten back from a deployment in Iraq. Upon our return, I was moved to a brigade that was already deployed to Afghanistan. This was because I was infantry deployed in a unit that did not normally have infantry. Since I just got back from Iraq, the only way to go to them in Afghanistan was to waive my dwell time. During that period, they could not deploy you unless you were home for at least the amount of time you were previously deployed. This was something I originally had no intention of waiving. I was then sitting in our battalion's command building waiting to get a meal card that would allow me to get food on base. During that time, a few of my friends came in who were about to waive their dwell times to deploy. One of them saw me and said, "Hey, are you coming with us?" I said, "I don't know. Does anyone have a quarter?" One of them actually did and handed it to me. I then said, "Heads I stay and tails I go." I flipped tails. I then got up from my seat and joined them in the area where they were sitting. I would then later on waive my dwell time. Then, in the next month, be sent to Afghanistan, where I would join the company I would be with for the rest of my time in the Army. I would then deploy with this same company a second time to Afghanistan. During that second deployment, I would save one of my friend's lives after he stepped on an IED. I would then extend my time in the army by a few months so I could finish off the deployment in Afghanistan without being sent home early. My contract was due to expire before the deployment finished. This extension would delay me going to college for a semester. I would then meet my wife during the first semester I went to college. That was over 10 years ago, and now my friend and I both just had our first children. He has a daughter and I have a son. Without me flipping that coin, he would not be alive, and neither of our children would exist today. Story 11. I've struggled with finding work for years. Then I, a self-taught English speaker, called an English school to schedule a proficiency test. It went so well that the head teacher gave me a teaching job on the spot. This gesture opened so many doors for me that it literally changed my life. Story 12. A friend of mine mentioned to his sister that I was an engineering student in college and good with mathematics. She was struggling. She called me and asked if I could teach her pre-calculus. Married for more than 20 years, currently teaching our son pre-calculus. Story 13. There is an old saying, if you don't ask, you don't get. When my manager quit, I gave the chief executive officer valid reasons why I should replace him and asked for the position. He agreed, and I went on to a very successful career. Story 14. I was having breakfast at a Waffle House on a Sunday morning during the Christmas season. I had woken up on the wrong side of the bed but had a nice conversation with the server, as it was only the two of us there. In the spirit of the season, I left a $20 tip and tried to get out before she noticed but failed. Her genuine joy and gratitude at the size of the tip made me feel all warm and fuzzy. Turned my day around, and I realized I needed a career that involved helping others instead of chasing money. That led, ultimately, to nursing school, and now I walk into work every shift feeling like I'm exactly where I belong. Story 15. I was working at a recording studio working with this really good local rock band. They invited me to attend their compact disc release party. On the night of the party, I am driving home from work. It was a rough night, and I planned on just going home and skipping the release party. As I reach my turn, I notice there's a car with hazards on stuck in the turn lane. So I decided to stay on the highway and just go to the compact disc release party. I ended up meeting my future husband there. 20 years later, we are still married. Story 16. I decided to fast-track high school, completing 5 years in 4. This meant I avoided the double cohort. I got into a prestigious university by the skin of my teeth. If I had been in the double cohort, I wouldn't have gotten in. When I applied for a job in the fall of 2007, the hiring manager liked that we went to the same school. It was a deciding factor in hiring me. If I hadn't fast-tracked, I would have been looking for a job a year later, in the fall of 2008. That was mid-crash. No one was hiring. My manager told us we were lucky to have jobs, and he was getting 100 resumes every day. Not a great manager. I kept my job through the recession. I am very far ahead in my career because I fast-tracked high school. It was the best decision of my life. Story 17. I've been disabled since birth, but aside from using a wheelchair for long distances, I had walked unaided all my life to that point. When I was about 18, I saw canes in the pharmacy area of a grocery store. On a whim, I picked one out and bought it. I only used it occasionally at first, but my conditions are not static. Inevitably, walking unaided became more difficult, and I ended up using the cane more. Several years later, my grandma surprised me with a quad cane, as she had noticed that I needed more support. I've had that quad cane for around 15 years, and it has undoubtedly saved my life on multiple occasions. Story 18. I was totally winging a very prestigious job interview. I got it and spent the next 16 years with imposter syndrome. The salary was worth it, though. That was years ago now. Since having kids, I have a normal job. Story 19. I worked at the same company for over 20 years. My friend told me he was leaving for another company. Something came over me and I said, "Do you think they would hire me?" 2 years into my new job, I am making triple my old salary. Story 20. To dance with the cute guy standing across the room. Married him 4 years later, and now we have been together for 42 years. What a beautiful dance it has been. Story 21. I was doing data entry for a while through an agency. One day I went to work, and the place was almost empty. There were only like 1 or 2 people there, and the manager was like, "Oh no, didn't your agency tell you?" It turned out they had let go of literally all of the agency people. There were about 100 of us. I called my representative at around 1 o'clock in the morning because I worked nights and was panicking. I said, "I have to have work tomorrow. I cannot not work." She was like, "Well, I have this one little job where you could go out for a few hours in the morning, but it's manual labor, and that's all I have." The data entry place was allowing me to work the rest of the night since I had shown up because they felt bad for me. So, the decision was whether or not I wanted to go put in 2 to 3 extra hours at some little joint stacking boxes after having worked all night long. This is back in the day and amounted to like $25. I decided to go ahead and do it because $25 is $25. Anyways, I ended up working there for about 20 years and eventually became a database engineer there as the company grew exponentially. I worked around 17 of those years in some form of IT/support/engineering in several job descriptions, and I learned it all on the job. Story 22. A man came through the door of a house party, and a voice in my head said, "This is the man you are going to marry." I did. We had a wonderful life until he dropped dead taking his morning walk 2 years ago. Story 23. I was dating this guy in our late teens, early 20s for a total of 8 years. We were bored and went to a Renaissance fair and made friends with the pirates. This led to a job offer which led to my 27 years in the film industry and finding a husband. Story 24. I made the very unfortunate decision to not go to college on a full-ride scholarship. Instead, I married a narcissist and had a child with him. I did end up going back to school and getting my associate's and bachelor's degrees in computer science. It took me a long time, and it was not as fun as it would have been if I had just gone at 19. Now I'm getting divorced. Story 25. I realized how the things that bothered me about my cats living with my mom were legitimate issues and that I wasn't just crazy. It then made me question if all the other stuff were also legitimate issues. Story 26. Went to a Halloween costume party on a whim. Ended up being where I met my wife. 13 years later, it's led to me moving to a different part of the country and having a son. Story 27. I jokingly threatened to shoot up my school in World of Warcraft in 2014. I was having a relaxing night leveling in the new World of Warcraft expansion, joking around in general chat like I always do. This is a chat where everyone in the same zone can talk to each other, no matter where you are in the zone. Me, being an edgy 15-year-old at the time wanting a reaction, made some school shooting jokes, got a reaction, then I took it too far and said what you see in the screenshot. With the context of the other chat logs, there is absolutely no doubt I was just joking around. But what I said was too specific and direct of a threat. I was even stupid enough to say my real school name. Immediately after typing it, I thought to myself, that was too far. I shouldn't have used my real school. I'm starting to get a lot of reactions in general chat, and I remember messaging my buddy, "Dude, I'm just making school shooting jokes and everyone's taking it so seriously. I think school honestly might get canceled tomorrow." I go to bed an hour later, enjoying the chaos I just caused. 4 hours later at 3 a.m. the FBI and police show up at my house, did a full psych evaluation on me, and searched the entire house. They didn't find anything, realized I'm not a threat, and I'm suspended for 10 days waiting for a school review. I had to, with my parents, sit down with my principal, school counselor, superintendent, chief of police, etc. As they went over my school record, every absent day, every missed assignment, and we had to sit there and go one by one through every single joke and message I sent in those 3 to 4 hours of playing World of Warcraft. I ended up being expelled from every school in the state of Illinois for 1 year, was sent to alternative school where I was suddenly around a lot sketchier, more questionable characters. There are so many different ways my life branched off into different paths when I was sent to alternative school, but I will focus on the biggest one. Fell into drugs, fell into selling drugs. Several years after high school, I'm still selling drugs and get snitched on by someone I've known since 5th grade. He bought 20 tabs of LSD off me while wearing a wire. The police raided my house, arrested me, and I was sentenced to 7 years in prison for a Class X LSD delivery charge. Once again, this has caused my life to branch off into so many alternative paths that I would never have taken before. I graduate trucking school next month. I wouldn't be trucking if I wasn't a felon, that's for sure. It's crazy to think how much my course of life was altered simply because I was being an edgy kid looking for a reaction with dark humor in World of Warcraft general chat. Story 28. I started to fall behind in math in middle school. In 7th grade, I passed Algebra 1 by the skin of my teeth. When signing up for classes for 8th grade, I decided I wanted to take Algebra 1 again since I had struggled so much the past year. My parents had to sign a special form and everything since I was technically retaking a class I had already passed. The second time around, things started to click and make sense, and I started to feel like maybe I could understand this subject. I continued taking math classes all 4 years of high school and eventually majored in math in college. I now work as an actuary, which is a career that uses a lot of math. I feel like retaking that class in middle school really altered the trajectory of my education and eventually my choice of career.